Hi Bruins, welcome to Electromagnetic Spectra. You can find these readings starting on page 93 of your interactive notebook. So here we go, electromagnetic spectra. Light from the sun may look white or yellowish, but it can be separated into a rainbow of colors. You can see this when light passes through a piece of glass called a prism, an instrument called a spectroscope, or water droplets in the sky. Would you please highlight prism and spectroscope? Light is packets of energy that move as waves of electricity magnetism. It is very hard to imagine electromagnetic waves. It helps to use wave graphs as models that explain how they behave. Electromagnetic waves do not require a medium. Will you please highlight that? They travel through empty space at a constant speed of 300,000 kilometers per second. If they pass through a medium like glass, water, or plastic, their speed slows down slightly. Spectroscopes. Spectroscopes can separate different wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation. Knowing the wavelengths lets you identify a light source. In class, you use spectroscopes to identify light sources. Waves of visible light, please highlight that and highlight radiation, have wavelengths between 400 and 700 nanometers. Spectroscopes also let you determine the chemical composition of the light source. How can you tell which substances are creating the light of the sun or a light bulb? When atoms' energy levels change, they absorb or give off certain wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation. The pattern or spectrum of wavelengths can identify different atoms and molecules. These light spectra can be used to identify the chemical composition of the light source. Take note. Imagine that you used a spectroscope to look at an unknown light bulb and you observed one thin yellow band of light about 590 nanometers. What conclusion could you make about the light source? Use evidence in your response. So, in order to answer that question, I would come down here to this data table of wavelengths, and this is 400 nanometers, 500 nanometers, 600 nanometers, 700 nanometers, and 800 nanometers. This top bar shows you the electromagnetic spectrum for sunlight. You notice it's blended, okay? And then each of these elements, if I light them on fire and I look at that fire through a spectroscope, I will notice a different composition. So if I'm looking for the answer to this question at 590 nanometers, I would look at sodium. There's one yellow thin band and it's at approximately 590 nanometers. Spectroscopes are important scientific tools because it is impossible to see atoms and molecules directly. Using spectroscopes, scientists can determine the chemical makeup of stars and planets that are light years away, or the composition of important molecules in cells and other structures. Spectroscopy, if you will highlight that please, can reveal more than just visible light. In fact, visible light is just a small portion of the millions of wavelengths that make up the electromagnetic spectrum. If you look at the diagram down below, you'll notice we have radio waves, microwaves, infrared waves, visible light, which is super tiny right here, ultraviolet, X-ray, and gamma rays. Invisible wavelengths beyond violet. What kinds of rays are in the electromagnetic spectrum? The shortest visible wavelengths are violet. Even shorter than violet are ultraviolet light, X-rays, and gamma rays. As you know, wavelength and frequency have an inverse relationship. Short wavelengths are associated with high frequency and high energy. Would you please highlight that? Short wavelengths are associated with high frequency and high energy. Ultraviolet or UV light has wavelengths shorter than visible violet light from about 10 to 400 nanometers. Would you highlight that, please? Ultraviolet rays have higher frequency and higher energy than visible light waves. These properties are one reason that ultraviolet light can cause sunburn and skin damage. The energy is high enough to excite the electrons within a molecule. X-rays. X-rays, if you'll highlight that, have wavelengths in the range of 0.01 to 10 nanometers, smaller than ultraviolet light. X-rays are used to study crystal structure. Ultraviolet and X-ray lights are not visible to our eyes, so their spectra are usually displayed as a wave graph. This information can also be interpreted by computers to display X-ray images. Gamma rays are the highest energy electromagnetic waves. Sources of gamma rays include radioactive substances, nuclear reactors, and lightning strikes. Astronomical processes such as nuclear fusion in stars and supernova explosions also create gamma rays. Take note. Think about the three kinds of electromagnetic radiation with higher frequency and higher energy than visible light: ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. What other sources of this radiation have you heard about? What questions do you have about these sources of radiation? Invisible wavelengths beyond red. Some waves are longer than the longest visible wavelengths, red. Would you highlight that? These include infrared waves, microwaves, and radio waves. As you know, long wavelengths are associated with low frequency and low energy. Infrared, IR waves, would you highlight that, range from 700 nanometers to about 1 millimeter. As with all spectra, infrared spectra can be used to identify and study chemicals. Microwaves. Microwaves have wavelengths ranging from 1 nanometer to 1 meter. Microwave spectra can be used to analyze the energy of molecules in gases. Radio waves range from 1 meter to 100 kilometers long. Large radio telescopes observe radio waves. The radio telescope in Green Bank, West Virginia, is used to study radio waves coming from galaxies and gas clouds in space. More than 140 different molecules have been observed in space based on their radio wave spectra. This graph shows a microwave spectrum for water vapor in the atmosphere at Mauna Kea, Hawaii. Take note. Think about the three kinds of electromagnetic radiation with lower frequency and energy than visible light: infrared waves, microwaves, and radio waves. What other sources of this radiation have you heard about? What questions do you have about these sources of radiation? Animals and vision. Your eyes can respond only to light with wavelengths in the visible range. Thus, you can see blue, red, green, and all other colors of the rainbow. But try as you might, your eyes cannot see colors beyond the visible spectrum. But what about other animals? So right here is the visible spectrum of light. Almost all animals have between 1 and 5 color receptors. The receptors let animals see fine differences in colors. Most humans have 3, but a rare genetic mutation gives some people 4. Does this extra color receptor let people see ultraviolet or infrared or even X-rays? No, but it does let those people see fine differences between colors more easily. They're actually starting to think that artists do have that gene that allows you to see extra colors. Bees and other pollinating insects can direct light in the ultraviolet range of the spectrum. They can detect special markings on flowers that have nectar. Some birds can also see ultraviolet. Their feathers can have patterns that reflect ultraviolet rays. These patterns help birds locate mates. Many animals that see ultraviolet light do not see the red end of the spectrum. Some animals can detect infrared waves. For example, rattlesnakes, pit vipers, boas, and pythons have infrared sensing pits on their heads. Some vampire bats have 3 infrared sensing pits on their nose. This sense helps them find the best place to attack. Some insects also can detect infrared. Blood-sucking bedbugs have infrared sensing organs on their antennae that help locate their prey. Some species of beetles have evolved infrared sensing for detecting forest fires so that they can lay their eggs in newly burnt wood. I'm going to read the caption for the photos. Both photos show the same cluster of flowers, but the bottom view showing ultraviolet light is more similar to how a bee sees them. The bee finds a nectar-rich blossoms, and the flowers attract an effective pollinator. So there's what we see at the top, and then there's what bees see at the bottom. Okay, think questions. What waves are in the electromagnetic spectrum besides visible light? And question number 2, how do light spectra help identify light sources? Okay, you're going to answer the think questions on page 102. You don't need to write the question, but you can go ahead and answer it. Thanks for joining me, and don't forget to click the subscribe button down below. I can't find my, oh, there I am. Whoa, there I am, down below. And then click the notifications up above. Have a lovely evening.